This conference will now be recorded.
Wow. Interesting.
Do you want to be on camera? Or no?
No, I don't need to be. I'll pop in a little bit from time to time. Okay, so I'm going to start you off with an easy one, Mike.
Okay.
The question is, do you like cake or pie? Which do you like more and what kinds?
I like cake and pie. Which do I like more? Well, probably my favorite would be chocolate cream pie. So I guess pie would be the preference there. I tend to like chocolate more than vanilla.
What about my mother's buttercream?
I haven't had your mother's buttercream pie for 30 years.
Cake.
Or cake, whatever.
I know, but that's good, isn't it?
It was good, yes.
And Sanders cake is pretty good.
Sanders cake,
bumpy
yeah,
cake.
something from Michigan where we were born and raised.
Mike's new obsession is dark chocolate Klondike.
Yeah, I
bars.
just discovered Klondike bars, even after all the years of all the ads.
Okay, the next one isn't a question, but a statement. Somebody wants more Hayden and Royce stories, so I'll just put that out there.
I've never heard that before. That's surprising.
Yeah, I know. We'll see what we can do about that. Will you ever do an audiobook of your short stories as a compilation with Tim Gerard Reynolds?
Would I ever do an audiobook, a compilation of my short stories? I would
Yes.
love to do I was thinking about this today. I don't think I have enough short stories to make an anthology or a compilation yet. But yeah, I would love to do it. And if Tim will do it, I mean, it's up to him. I don't know if he'll want to, but yeah, I have a number of short stories now. I don't think I have quite enough to do an entire, one binding. So when I do, I would love to put that out. I was thinking about that today because I was thinking that how we market that is important, because I have to make sure that everyone knows in the description that probably a lot of them have already been released and some are free. But for those people who have not been able to find them, it'd be nice to have all those in one binding. Plus, I'd probably add a few more that hadn't been released before.
And for people who don't know, there are 2 short stories that are up on Audible that are already free. And yes, they are recorded by Tim Gerard Reynolds. The first one's called The Jester, and the other one is called Professional Integrity. There also is one that used to be free. It's called The Viscount and the Witch, but that is now a small fee. It's like $2.95. And the thing with that particular one is it's actually, if you read the Rose and the Thorn, you actually get that story, because that was the short that turned into The Crown.
Yeah, most of my short stories I've not done for money. Most of it has gone to charities to raise money for one thing or another. It started off with Sean Speakman, and then there was Sandy and Hurricane Sandy.
Yeah.
So we had a number of things where it's usually been to benefit writers or to benefit people who had needed money. So I've never actually put out a short story ever for actual cash. So, but I just think that there's probably a lot of people who probably don't know about my short stories, so it might be nice to have it in book form.
Next question. Oh, and by the way, if you want to type questions in the chat area, we will get to those as well. And if we run out of time and we don't get to them, I'll have Mike do one of these sessions by himself, and he'll answer them, and then we'll post both recordings up. Which is or are your favorite of your books?
Which is or are the favorite of my books? Well, I probably Persepolis is my favorite, because that was the book I started out to write when I began the Writer of Revelations, and all the books that I wrote in that series were all just getting me to the point of being able to write Persepolis, which was sort of the archetype novel of the Great Quest, which is what I wanted to write to begin with. But I had to make sure I had all the characters built up, or otherwise it wouldn't make sense. So, and that was fun to write, because every single chapter or scene in that story was, to me, exciting to write, because there was always something really cool happening in every single scene. And when you write a book, sometimes there are sections that are kind of a bit slow because it's building its this necessary backstory. But because everything was already done when I got to Persepolis, it was just all fun. And that's probably one of the more enjoyable ones that I have.
Okay. Somehow I knew you were going to say that.
You did?
I did.
Oh.
So this next question involves a character that comes up in the Death of Dulgath. Her name is Scarlett Dodge. So I'm going to do the spoiler warning here. If you have not read the Death of Dulgath, you may want to turn off your audio temporarily. And
I just heard it beep, because that's some.
That's just people coming in.
Oh.
So if you haven't read The Death of Dual Gath, you might not want to listen to this part of it. And when we're done talking, we'll put up the end spoiler message so you know you can turn your audio back on. Okay, so this person likes the character Scarlett Dodge and is wondering if Hadrian might perhaps run into her in any future Chronicle stories.
Oh, well, I kind of feel a lot like Stephen King once when he was writing Dark Tower. Apparently someone was dying and she asked what was going to happen. And he said, I don't know. And he meant it because he was literally writing each book at a time. And the same is true with me. I have a couple of things that I said happened during the writer Revelations, and those have to happen at specific points in time. For example, it's going to be the 5th year, I mentioned that Drumendor would take place, so the next book would have to be Drumendor. So there are certain things that have to happen at specific times, but the rest of them I don't actually have no clue what happened. So it's entirely possible that something like Pickles or Scarlet or even
Careful who you mention, because we've only talked about Dualgath being a spoiler. Don't talk about other characters.
I'm just saying that there are other characters who could return, and I have no idea because I haven't gotten around to it yet. It all depends. I was going to put a reoccurring character in the last book in Winter's Daughter, but I had the person in there and it just didn't work, so they ended up on the cutting room floor, if you will. So I don't know until I get done with it.
Okay, so hold up your sign so people know.
And spoiler. That way.
I know it must be hard to choose, but who is your favorite character? And I'm going to assume that's from your books.
We talking all my books or just right here?
Okay, this is for all your books.
Oh, that's a tough one. Probably Myron. He was one of my favorites. He's what I would consider to be kind of like the perfect character as far as I'm concerned, just because I happened to have, after I wrote him, I was watching the movie Wall-E, and I really liked the character Wall-E. Then I realized why. It was because it was like Myron. It was a character that no matter what happens to the person, they're always positive and upbeat, and you really can't bother them. I mean, you could kill them and it still wouldn't seem to be a big deal. And I love that character because it's such a positive person. You would like to have that person around a lot. And they're fun to write, and they just strike me as being a very good, positive character that would be enjoyable. So, the other ones have far more angst. Royce is always fun to write, but because he has those kind of intellectual kind of cynicism barbs that he can throw. But I don't know. I've always been partial to Myron.
Me too. I love Myron. Okay, so what are some recent recommendations for books that you can suggest to people who like your stuff?
Ooh, that's a tough one. People who like my stuff. Rachel Aaron is Elon Mom Press is always one that I thought was similar to what I write.
The Legend of Elon Mom.
Yes, and then there's Scott Lynch's books, Gentleman Bastard, Liza Lockamora, which is also, it's about thieves and it has some humor in it. I actually have a hard time finding books that are really similar to mine. I wish I could find more like that, but I don't have anything like that. There's nothing out there to say that if you like my books, you'll definitely like these. I don't really have anything like that. I like books that are not in that genre. I love The Martian by Andy Weir and Ready Player One. I enjoyed that, and Fault in Our Stars. But these are not books that are even in the same genre, so they're hard for me to explain.
You also liked Red Rising.
Yeah, Red Rising. Yes. But I wouldn't exactly say Red Rising was all like my book. It's different.
Right. Yeah.
But then again, I like different types of books as well. So.
Will you be doing any in-person signings at events or conventions?
Yeah, but I don't know that you're gonna go there. The only event or signing that I have coming up is going to be in Italy, which will be starting Halloween. And I'll be there for like 4 days.
No, we'll be there like 8 days.
Oh, really? Okay, 8 days. She knows more than I do. But no, other than that, that's the only things I have that's listed. But unless you want to get a plane ticket to Italy.
This might have been for the writing area, but I'm going to ask it here. Stephen King says he writes 2,000 words a day, no matter how long it takes. Other writers have said they write for a specific period of time, resulting in varied output from day to day. What is your writing routine?
Well, I write in the mornings from the time I get up to the time I get tired of writing, and whatever I write is whatever I write. But on average, what I tend to do is around 2,000 words. I will sometimes do more, sometimes do less. I think lately, as I get older, I'm slowing down a little bit. I think I'm averaging more along the lines of 1,700 words a day now. But I mean, if I'm on a roll, I'll exceed that. If I'm, struggling, I might be, down to 1,000 words. But I don't really put any goals or pressures on myself to get it done because I mean, if you're writing 2,000 words a day, you're going to write a lot more than like 3 novels a year, which I don't need to do that. So, I mean, if I can put out 2 novels a year, I'll be happy. So, and of course, if I'm editing, that's a different thing. And for you don't understand, editing is when I'm going over my work and I'm kind of cleaning it up or making changes to something based off comments. That I can do much longer, and I'll write into the afternoons for that. But if I'm actually writing raw, original words, then that will actually take me, I'll get tired. It usually takes me like an hour to get into writing, and then for 2 hours, I'm really writing very well. And I'm hitting it, and it's just perfect. And then the last hour, I notice my quality is dropping off. I'm getting tired. I'm not doing as well. And I know if I keep writing, then what's going to happen is I'm just going to rewrite it again the next day. So I don't bother with that. So I usually write for 4 hours, and 2 of those hours are really good. The first one just getting up to speed. The last one's running out. What's going on?
Sorry.
What are we doing?
We got some feedback.
What are you doing?
Well, I was getting into the session, and now got 2 with me.
Okay. That's awesome. I just finished Revelations yesterday. Actually, it's crazy to think the first 2/3 were all to get to that book.
Okay, sorry about that. I was trying to, so I could read this on my machine, but obviously having 2 machines.
Actually, I could probably put that on this and you could use that.
Okay, well, my eyes aren't the best, but I'll go over there in a moment. Okay, next question. Suri is one of my favorite characters in all of literature, at least the portion of it I have read. She certainly is in my top 5. How easily, naturally did her creation come to you?
Pretty easily. I didn't really spend too much effort. I just wanted an interesting character. I mean, a lot of my characters, I have no idea where they come from. It's not like I sit down and think, I'm going to do this for this reason or because it's like that person. I have no idea where they come from. Oftentimes they're developed by the plot. I'll have a situation and I'll need a certain type of person to affect that situation in a certain way. So I'll build a character in order to facilitate that. And Siri was kind of that way, but I wanted her, she's at sort of the beginning of the story, certainly at Persephone's beginning. And so in order to make it interesting, whenever I start any scene, I always try to make it as interesting as possible. So Persephone is more kind of like the character that the reader would identify with. So I need to have something that's really odd or unusual to catch the attention of the reader. So Siri took on that role, and I just wanted to make her different but likable. And I think, quite frankly, as I was writing scenes out, one of the ones I came across was when she starts describing trees, which is actually, I think, in the 3rd chapter that she's in. And once I got to that scene, and I just kind of started riffing on the idea that each species of tree had a different nature, that really solidified her in my mind, and I knew exactly how to treat her after that point. Then she became kind of this wild, crazy, young girl that was just really cool. So after doing that with each, scene, she gets more elaborate until, Brin is like revering her as this great hero that she would like to be. So yeah, she developed over time, but I think she just started from the beginning of the idea that, I just needed a character that would be really interesting to play off of Persephone.
Any plans for more stories with Royce and Hadrian?
Did we already have this one?
No, they just said they liked Royce and Hadrian.
Well, yeah, if I have a queue of of books that I have to get done. And I mean, so I have to get them done because some are under contract. So, I mean, I have some in order. So if you know anything about what I've been doing, if you've been following along with my blog or Robin's reports or comments made, you'll know that I wrote the 6 Rhaenyra books, then I wrote 4 Chronicle books, and then I started a new series where there's going to be 6 of the Age books or the Legends of the First Empire books. And now I'm writing hopefully 3 books to connect those 2 series.
We'll see what that ends
I'm
up to
pretty
be.
sure I already got the first one done. So I'm pretty sure that there's going to be 3 of them. I divided it up that way intentionally. So those will be 3, which I call the bridge book, which will connect the Age books to the Rhaenyra books. And when I get done with that, I have an idea for another book that I really like. I've been working on, and I have notebooks on, and I want to get to as soon as I can. Hopefully I can do that sometimes next year. After that, then I may turn my mind to doing Drumendor, which I happened to let slip to my wife that the name would be Drumendor, and suddenly she decided to put that on Goodreads, and now everyone's expecting this book.
Well, technically speaking, I didn't say it was definitely coming. But as most people know, as far as the Rhaenyra Chronicles is concerned, you know, Mike's really sensitive about, you know, the pair overstaying their welcome. So what we do is he writes a book, we release it, we kind of get the temperature of the people, and if people want more, then we do more. And the kind of plan all along, you know, with the Legends book was that we would put those out like 1 a year, and then we try and slip in some self-published chronicles in between them. So timing we really won't know because we just released Winter's Daughter like yesterday. And although it's been soft release for a year or 10 months or so, I mean, we have a pretty good feel that people want more. But of course, the people who are getting it, you know, during that kind of soft release, I mean, those are die-hard fans. So of course they're going to say they want more. So from my perspective, I want to see a good 4 months of regular people into Disappearance of Winter's Daughter. Make sure that they all still seem to think that the pair haven't overstayed their welcome, and then we can, you know.
What she really wants is for me to write more of them, and this is all her.
Yes. But I'm willing to let it go if the readers say so.
She was very upset to discover that I could actually, you know, have fun with Royce and Hadrian in my own head. She's like, I can't do that. It's not fair.
Yeah, because I have no creativity at all. Okay, now the question, what character do you like most from the Legends series? You can pick more than one. Would you or have you ever considered writing? Okay, that's not a question, sorry.
Well, obviously, Ciri's fun. I enjoyed her. She's one of the cooler characters. She'd probably be my number 1 as far as what I enjoyed, you know, doing the most. But I mean, I also have a fondness for Ronan Gifford. Obviously, for those of you who have read Age of War, you would know why. But there's a lot of cool characters. But I would have to say probably Ciri. And a lot of people seem to have agreed with me.
Would you or have you ever considered writing for another medium, like a video game?
I wouldn't know how. I have no idea how to write for a video game or anything else. I spent a long time learning how to write novels. So even writing short stories, for me, I think I'm not as good at it. Even that's hard for me to do because it's a completely different mindset in how you go about it, and making a good one is quite different from writing a novel. So I couldn't even imagine what I would do for a video game. I mean, I like games, and in fact, I was talking to my daughter recently about making a game, but what I realized is back in the 90s, there was a lot of games that came out that were in reference to a movie or a book, and they were invariably always awful. And the reason for that was because they weren't good games. They were just taking the medium and they were turning it into a game. So there was nothing cutting edge about the game. There's nothing inventive about it. So there's nothing good about it. So what if I was to make a game? I would want to make a really good game first and then just kind of tack on the Rhaenyra stuff so that, number 1, it would be really fun to play. And number 2, you get a little flavor, but the primary thing would be a great game. And so, yeah, I probably wouldn't be that great for a writer of a game.
What is your favorite way to relax and clear your mind?
You mean like drinking?
I guess that could be one of it.
Relax and clear my mind. I usually go for walks. I do that, but I often do that to work. I go for walks and I think. But I'll listen to music. I like this, like in the evenings, I will sit on the deck of the cabin here and play music and have a beer or something. But I mean, that's generally how I tend to relax. But I don't watch television. My wife has a tendency to chill out to watching television. I will generally listen to music or read or go for walks, I suppose.
Okay. This next one is going to have a spoiler. It, again, is going to relate to the death of Dulgath, although it also has some bleed over into Legends of the First Empire. So I guess if you haven't read the first 3 books of the Legends of the First Empire, or you haven't read The Death of Dulgath, you should probably turn off your audio now, and we'll flash the sign when it's time to come back. The question is, do we know enough from the first 3 Legends of the First Empire books to figure out who is the person possessing Nissa in Death of Dulgath? They go on to make a guess. I don't know whether I should say what their guess is, but I will say that their guess is correct.
Okay, never mind. I think what your question really means is, do you have enough information to definitively know? And no, you do not have enough information to definitively know who it is. But you should have enough to have a pretty strong inclination. And obviously, whoever this is who wrote this got it right, because my wife told you did. Yeah, a lot of people get it wrong because they're introduced to the character a little bit later in the series than what they imagine. So they're introduced to different characters. They say, oh, it must be that person, not realizing that there's other people who can crop up and become more important. A lot of things happen in my books is that you start with a character and they seem trivial, and then suddenly they over the course of the story, they become far more significant. And that's what's happening here. So you will be pretty certain of it by the end of it. But right now, I don't know you can definitively say you would know, but you probably have enough information to make a pretty good guess.
And I will say a lot of people have guessed wrong.
Okay. We're ending that spoiler.
Okay.
Does anyone know, is this backward? Can you tell me if this is backward when you're seeing? Because it's backward when we look at our screen.
Oh, it's forward, folks.
Oh, cool.
It's backwards to us. Okay. Will we ever see more of the world of Hollow World in the future?
I would like to do more. In fact, I have a folder called Hollow World 2, which shows you how much I've gotten done with it. It doesn't even have a real name. But I always dump information in it, but that's how the first book got written. I kept putting information in a notebook that I wanted to talk about at some point, and I'm doing that with Hollow World. But it's going to be down the route quite a ways. I have, let's see, I've got 1, 2, 3, at least 4 books ahead of it. One of them happens to be the Drumendor one.
Have you ever thought of making the Book of Brin a reality, or is it always going to be the precious piece of history forever lost? Should that be?
No.
Okay.
I don't think that I would actually ever be able to write that out, because I'm not as good a writer as Brin is. So no, I don't plan on actually turning that into a real book. It would be really difficult for me to do that. I had no intentions of doing it, so I didn't plan it that way, so it'd be hard to actually put that together.
So this next question is a huge spoiler.
Huge spoiler now.
Huge spoiler. So if you have not read
For what?
Age of Swords.
Age of Swords. There's going to be some people out there who haven't got that.
If you have not read Age of Swords, you do not, I repeat, you do not want your audio on.
Okay.
This is important. So take your audio off, and here we go. What was it like going through the process of knowing you had to kill Mina?
Ooh. I'm not even sure when I came across that decision. I know that some people had talked about at the Age of Myth, they were frightened I was going to kill Mina in the final scene. And I'm like, uh-oh. They were upset about that. Okay. They're going to be really upset later. That was, again, just a situation where the plot kind of demanded it. Things came together in order to make it work really well. That was going to have to happen. What was it like? It was, it was sad, because I mean, when I write sad things, I get sad too. So yeah, it was pretty depressing to write it. And like I said, every time I call it real magic. It's like whenever I can really affect myself emotionally, I know it's going to do that to other people. And so, yeah, it was not fun. It was just as visible for me for you guys to read.
I will say it was, for me, it was horrific to edit, because like the first time I read it and when I wasn't editing, I was devastated. And then I was editing it during the time when you and James were staying the cabin and I was at the hotel in a pool. And I remember I had to edit the scene. I had just read it and I was like outright crying, like tears running down my face. And I literally could not like do any editing. I had to like get in the pool so no one could see me crying. And I had to like swim for a good hour before I could come out and do anything again.
Maybe you can tell me that I used to do a podcast with 3 other people, and one was a woman writer, and for some reason I can't remember her name.
I know who you're talking about, the one who lives in Celebration, Florida.
Yes, and I can't recall her name, but I remember one of the things she said was she killed a cat in her story, and her readers hated her. So you can kill people all the time, but don't kill an animal. So I felt really bad. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to make everyone hate me when I do this. It wasn't as bad as I thought, so that was pretty good. But there was another character who I will not name in the Rhaenyra series who also died, and a similar thing. I had an editor going through and editing that, and they just came downstairs and I said, what's wrong? I said, I need a break. Like you can't edit that scene and just keep going. So yeah, they tend to be somewhat traumatic, but I'm also sick and twisted. So
you can put the spoiler.
Yes.
Okay.
We're all back.
And we're all back. What's your favorite part of living in Marais? Do you find the new location has increased creativity?
I would say increased creativity. It allows me more solitude, so I can write better. When I was working in DC, it was very annoying because there'd be leaf blowers going outside or people talking outside my window, or I had other people in the house, my children were there, and so they'd be talking and be very distracting. So here I don't have that. My wife has been incredibly good. She will actually go to another building during my writing time so that she doesn't distract me with phone calls, which is one of the greatest distractions I have. So she goes over there and I have the place to myself and I can be totally isolated. Because when I write, I really don't like much of anything. I will put non-lyrical music on, or when I mean non-lyric music, when I'm writing as a means of blocking sound. So if someone's talking in the room, I'll put like classical music on or something so as to block that, but I generally don't have anything. So what that allows me to do is when I'm writing, I can hear the words in my head better, but I can also read them aloud to myself, which is a tremendous help, because reading aloud is a great way to find when you're just not doing it right. And it helps to figure out, how to do it better. So, and I feel self-conscious if I'm reading aloud to myself. Plus, it would be a spoiler for Robin in the next room if she happened to be there. So her leaving is great. Having no one else around, being able to, be far more comfortable when I'm doing, that's great for me.
I'm actually going to take this next question. It says, is there anything we can do to increase our chances of being selected by Robin as an alpha or beta reader?
Okay.
Well, first of all, there are no alpha readers but me. So you're not missing out on anything there.
There's only one alpha reader.
Yeah. That makes me an alpha dog, maybe.
Yes.
So I
got a dog.
I do the alpha reading for Michael. Beta readers, boy. So this is really difficult because so many people want to be beta readers. And I have put way more people in the beta reader program than I really should, because I always feel like, oh, this person really wants to be in, or this or that. The reality is I have a core group of beta readers that have done just wonderfully for us over the years. So I kind of always have them in. And then every time we do a new beta, we always have new people. And then I pick up some of those as like, kind of my core group. But every time I do put in new people. And I just get a lot more requests than I can fulfill. Usually what I'm doing is I'm trying to even things out as far as men and women, writers and non-writers, young people and old people, people based in the United States, people based outside the United States.
Yeah, she's not actually trying to, give preference to French. She's actually trying to get a good cross section of readers.
Yeah. So it's hard. I think the biggest beta reader I ever did was 50 people. And that was tough because I have to, for people who haven't gone through the beta reader program or doesn't know what it's involved, it's not just a matter of reading the book and you saying, I liked it or I didn't like it. I mean, you have to answer a bunch of questions about the book. You have to rate each chapter on like 5 different criteria. It's actually quite a bit of work, but not only is it quite a bit of work for you, but it's quite a bit of work for me, because what I have to do is I have to take all that beta information and then distill it down and give Michael kind of a very concise list of things for him to go over. And many times we'll have things that the two of us disagree on. And so there'll be questions about that in the beta read program. So, the bottom line is the more people I put in the beta reading program, the harder it is for me, the longer it takes me to go through. So I guess about the only thing that can really help you getting in the beta read program is just kind of be in one of those weird categories. Like, if I don't have, like if you happen to be like, I don't know, over 65 and not a writer, and I don't have any over 65 people not a writers, that would make you more likely. I mean, your pool is smaller, so your chance of getting in is a little bit better. But I know a lot of people want to be in the beta reader program. It's really, really, really hard because I want to put everyone into it. But we literally get 400 to 500 people who want to get in the beta reader program every time I do it. And I can only take like 25 to 40 people at the most. So that's the skinny on that. I just finished reading Age of Myth, part of a family book club. My wife and I loved it. While reading, I found myself really wanting to see these characters in a multi-part, high-product value TV show. Have you considered this for any of your writing?
You'd be surprised to learn that I don't have any control over that. I don't own a production company or a studio, and they're not, banging on my doors. As it happens, however,
you can say that.
We had,
just don't say too much.
I'm gonna say we do have a person who's trying actively to turn it into a television series and or movie. And
they basically have bought the options.
They bought the options, and they're trying to get a screenplay written. So
and we've seen one screenplay.
Right. And so, but we would love to do it too. The problem is that just like you, I'm sure you don't want to have it be garbage, and we don't want it to be garbage either. And it's hard to get a good quality product because my books are not Harry Potter. They're not super huge, so I'm not going to be able to draw in the super great script writers to be able to produce it. So I mean, it's going to be difficult to be able to find something that's not cringeworthy. Hopefully they'll be able to do it. We're still got our fingers crossed, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and the other thing is you got to keep in mind that like we are like on step 2 of like 1,000-step journey, right? Yeah. I mean, we've got an executive producer, we have a screenwriter, we have a first script for a pilot, but I mean, the script needs a lot of work, and we've already gone over some of that. Actors have to be determined, directors have to be determined, money has to be raised, studios have to come on board. But
it is really cool to be
a lot
in a situation where, I mean, I just a few years ago, 10 years ago to be exact, I just happened to write a story, and now they're talking about like throwing names of big actors out there saying, well, maybe we can buy them for this. I'm like, really? That's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, surreal. So next.
How much time do you get to read?
Not nearly enough. The problem is that a lot of my work is reading. I'm reading my own stuff. I'm reading, research for my stuff. So it's a lot of it is my own reading. So to read other people's work, I generally do that in the evening, but by then I'm getting kind of tired. So I don't get a lot of reading in, but I'm the type of person who will literally read a few pages a day and that's it. I will get through novels, but it takes me a long time because I don't have a lot of time before I start getting drowsy and I'm not even remembering what I'm reading. So I will literally, like, I've been reading Stephen King books just for the fun of it, and I literally will read 3-4 pages a day, and that's it. But I've gone through several novels that way. In the evening times, I will pick up, different things that people send me because I have people who want me to read their novels, and I'm like, well, I'm really picky. So I basically warn people I probably won't like it because I got to a point now where all I find are faults in writing. So it's really hard for me to do that. But occasionally I will find a book that I actually like. City of Brass is one of the books that was sent to me. They asked me to say something about it, and I did. One of the few books I read that I really did like. So I do that. But in my entire 10-year career, and literally people sent me stuff to blurb in my very first publication. When I got my first book published, I had at least 2 people send me their books. And in 10 years, I think I have blurbed or given praise to like 4 novels.
Something like that.
Something like that. And I get them all the time. I get them from publishers. I get them from individuals. I get them from friends. It's really bad when you have a friend ask you, would you please? Like, no, I can't. Because I've actually have blurbed some books and I've met people and they said, why did you blurb this? This wasn't very good. I'm like, really? I thought it was okay. But so, I mean, people hold me accountable to these things, so I got to be careful.
Interestingly enough, there have been 2 writers we've had out here at the land recently. One of which I was totally shocked by because Mike read her piece and he said, this is good enough where it could be published. Now, of course, we had some changes, mainly line edits. But Michael doesn't say that very often to new writers, and this was a young new writer, so that was really quite exciting to run across this what's her name? Began with an M.
Monty.
Yeah, Monty. So she did a great job. There's also a person by the name of John, who actually I liked his work a lot better than Mike did because I thought that his writing was very clean and avoided many of the mistakes that I see in 99.9% of the work that we get. There are all kinds of rookie mistakes that people run into, and he didn't suffer from any of those, so I actually thought it was quite good. Michael had some issues with that, and he's gone back and he's working on it, and we'll take another look at that in the near future.
Well, generally speaking, the better the writing, the more feedback I'm going to give. Yeah. So if a person gives me something and they're really terrible, then I probably won't make too much of a comment on it. I'll give them general pointers to how to go in a better direction. But if someone's really good, and I think they actually have potential to be published, then I'm going to get really nitpicky. And that's what I did with John, because he was above average, so I was really kind of leaning, and she didn't like the fact I was leaning on him that hard. But I figured if he wants to do, I don't want him to just get published. I want him to get published and be successful. And to do that, I wanted to push him harder. That's why she thought I was a little too harsh.
Well, I thought he was really good. I like I said, usually I cannot get through the first 1 page of someone's manuscript, and I read like 5 of his pages, and I was still interested. And I didn't have much redlining, and that's just very unusual for me. So I don't know how we're going to do this next question. Okay. I don't think I'm going to have to put up the spoiler thing, okay, because I think I can kind of go around this. It involves Age of Legends of the First Empire. So if you have read Legends of the First Empire, maybe you want to turn off your audio, and we will put up the sign. But this isn't like it's not a big spoiler. Okay. This person is questioning about the Tetlin Witch, and they're wondering if, as of Age of War, when some information about the Tetlin Witch comes out,
right,
is that all we're going to ever hear about the Tetlin Witch, or will she come up in future books?
Okay, so for those of you who have read me, if you've read Writer Revelations, you should be aware of this. Never trust me. If I tell you something in the book, it might not be true. So what you've heard may not be true, and no, you're going to find out more about the Titan Witch.
Okay, you can put up your.
Oh, so end of spoiler for those of you who may have tuned out. Welcome back. We're now going to talk about cooking.
Let's see here. How do you feel after writing what I consider to be the best scene in all books? This is the passage of Gifford and the fire. Did you know he had that talent all along? So
Okay.
we're gonna put, so this would be a spoiler for anyone who hasn't read Age of War, right?
I don't think you need a spoiler.
Okay.
Because all I can say is no, I didn't.
No, you didn't what?
I didn't know that about Gifford when I started writing him. He was a support character, as some of the other ones were, and they all developed into something. See, and I think I can do it without a spoiler. When I first started the Age books, I had two camps. I had the Glantians and I had the Persephone group. And as I started writing them, I actually found the Persephone characters, like Roan and Moya and all them, to be far more interesting, just as characters. They're far more fascinating and more diverse. When I was looking at the Glantians, they were all kind of the same. They're all warriors, and I mean, there wasn't much diversification between those characters. So I focused on the female character just because they happened to have more personality. And so I ended up developing them way more than I had anticipated, because it was going to be kind of an equal balance. And it turns out I got bored of the warriors. So I focused on the female characters just because they were way more interesting. And as they grew and became more dominant in the story, Gifford's role grew up. And then I started putting certain pieces together about how the art works, and things of that nature led one thing to another. But no, I don't always know what's going to happen as I'm writing it. Some of it develops as I go along. And he was not meant to be a major character initially. He ended up, I think by Age of Swords is when I started, near the end of Age of Swords. If you know the scene I'm talking about at the end of Age of Swords, you'll know when it was that I went, oh, I should make him more significant.
You can put your spoilers.
Okay, so
people might turn
in case someone turned it off.
How do you, as a contemporary fantasy author, feel about the shadow of Tolkien on the literary landscape? For some, it can seem oppressive and limiting. V.E. Schwab's J.R. Tolkien lecture and George R.R. Martin's famous tax comments come to mind. For others, it's the elephant in the room, authors from the Ward and the Word interviews. Was his work an influence directly or indirectly? And what effect does exposure of giants who have come before have on your work?
I'm unaware of most of those comments, so I can't speak directly to them. What I would say is that I don't really look at it that way. I kind of divide books into just two groups. I don't really recognize genre so much, except that it helps people if they happen to like a type of story that they're looking for that. But even so, that really doesn't apply. There are two groups of books. They're good and they're bad. And I don't really there's no difference from that for me. That's why I'm saying that I would like things like Shantaram or The Martian or Fault in My Stars, which are of completely different genres. But to me, they're all in the same group. They're all good books. They're all well-written books. Tolkien is a well-written book. It happens to be a fantasy story. And because of that, I liked it. And people would perceive that what I write now is adopting several of his tropes, when in fact that is absurd, because all his tropes came from William Morris, and all his tropes came from, mythology, which of course they both were professors of that type of studying, so they both use the same things. I find it weird that now modern people are using words like orc and things that Tolkien created. But I mean, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't use hobbits. I wouldn't use orcs, because those are proprietary to him, in my opinion. But goblins and dwarves and elves, all of those things are, things that have been around for thousands of years, and they're complete, open game. I mean, he borrowed stuff from Morris, and who was, decades ahead of him. To me, it's just a matter of, do you write well? Do you do a good job? I thought that a lot of the books that followed Tolkien immediately were not that great, which is why I didn't really follow fantasy initially. In the late 70s and early 80s, I wasn't that big an aficionado of fantasy because I didn't really like it. It wasn't as good. I was looking for something that was as good as Tolkien. I couldn't find it, which is one of the reasons why I started writing. So there's good writing and there's bad writing. And I mean, I think Stephen King's a great writer too. I adopt a lot of his style. I think Steinbeck is a great writer and I adopt a lot of his style. So I try to reflect good writing, what I perceive to be good writing.
I was going to say, every time you say good writing, bad writing, you drive me insane because
I always make the assumption that people understand that if I say it's good writing, it's my opinion. What else could it possibly be?
Yeah.
I'm not an objective. I'm not God.
In this house,
right.
You know, we classify as good writing as anything that Michael likes, and bad writing being anything Michael doesn't like.
Right.
Even though, quote unquote, that bad writing may be perfectly acceptable and preferred by many readers.
Pulitzer Prize winning and Nobel Prize winning and National Book winning books that I can't stand. So obviously my opinion is not universal, but in my opinion, I divide things based off of what I like, obviously.
Michael, do you feel that after writing 10 novels lovingly based around Royce and Hadrian, you have a fundamentally deeper understanding of the characters? Like you know what's in their heads to more of an acute degree than you did when you first wrote The Crown Conspiracy?
Sure. I mean, Robin probably knows me a lot better now after 30 years of marriage. Over 30 years of marriage.
30? It's more than that.
It just seems longer, doesn't it?
Oh,
I knew that was it.
Oh, you're looking for trouble.
No, I'm just saying that if you know something longer, then of course. I mean, I've written more words, I've seen more events, I know where they're coming from, so I have a bit more control. But I would actually say that by the end of Rhaenyra, the Revelations, I pretty much knew them. I remember when I was starting to write the Chronicles, my wife wondered if I could do it again, because it had been a while. Because I had written another book in the
I was scared.
You didn't think I could do it?
I didn't.
You didn't think I could remember them?
No.
But yeah, no, they're.
And what did I say about them when I read Chronicles? What was the main thing I said about them?
I don't know.
When I read the Chronicle books, and I got both of them together because you wrote number 2 and then you went, I got to go back and write number 1. But when I read the Chronicles, what came to my mind was this is quintessential Royce and Hadrian. In other words, it was exactly Royce and Hadrian. You know, like it was the perfect embodiment of them. So I think you did a really good job of capturing that Royce and Hadrian.
The thing that's hard is to try and come up with something new, but also bring something new to their characters. Because when I wrote Revelations, what I didn't want to have happen, because what happens when you write a series is you write the first book and you define the character, the main characters, and then you write the story, and then you're not necessarily sure there's going to be a second book. So you want to put everything in the kitchen sink in that first book. So when you get the second book, you're like, I guess I'll just introduce new characters, and nothing new is revealed about the main characters, which kind of makes them weak as you go along in the series. So I didn't want to do this. So when I wrote Revelations, I started out not telling you purposely a lot about the characters. When you read the very first book, The Crown Conspiracy, you kind of feel like my characters are pretty shallow because I don't tell you much of their backstory. I don't get into their personas much. So because I want that developed over the entire series. So now that I've finished that, it was supposed to be complete. Now, as I read the Chronicles, I'm thinking, what else can I give you? Because I want each book to give the reader something new about the main characters so that they're fresh, they're exciting, they're worthwhile reading. So that is a bit of a challenge.
So you've already answered this, but it actually says they would like to hear from both of us. So I'm going to bring it up again. Who is your favorite non-main character and why? And I think you've already said Myron, because Myron is obviously a non-main character. So for me, Myron is probably my favorite character, both main and non-main. Actually, we're a weird family because like Sarah, our daughter, her favorite characters are always kind of the side characters, right? I mean, we tend to like side characters sometimes more than we like main characters, and even though everyone knows about my undying love for Hadrian, who's obviously a main character.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Myron definitely is a huge favorite of mine. In the Legends of the First Empire, this is going to be really weird, and you probably might even find this weird. Well, Gifford I absolutely adore. I've loved Gifford since the moment I met him, and I've loved him for a long time. Um, but Moya, and the reason why I like Moya is in the first book, I hated Moya. When I read the first book, Mike said to me, he says, "What do you think of Moya?" I says, "Oh, I don't like her at all. She's just a pretty face. She's kind of shallow. I don't like her at all." But then in Age of Swords, we were able to see her more and see how she works and how she thinks and what she does. And I really fell in love with Moya then. And I think I fell in love with her more because I didn't like her in book one, and I really liked her in book two. And then I gotta say, Roan is she's pretty awesome. And I think what I like most is actually Roan and Gifford, because I think the dynamic with Gifford being broken on the outside and Roan being broken on the inside just make for a really great, interesting combination. And for those who don't know, between me and Michael, we always kind of say that we fill each other's gaps. Like the things that I'm really good at are very right brainy, they're mathematical, they're scientific, they're is that right brain or left brain?
I'm not sure. I think left brain might be the analytical.
Well, whatever. Well,
it's the opposite of what you think.
Anyways, Michael's very creative, and so I'm very logical and engineering-ish, and he's very creative, and so we always kid the fact that, like, if you put us both together, we almost make a whole person, because we kind of fill in both sides of that. So anyways, that's who I like. Is there any other characters you want to expound upon that?
No, but I was just going to say that I like it when I take a character that people initially don't care for, and then I can make you like them. And it's even fun if you can kind of go on a roller coaster where you like them, then you don't like them, then you like them again. That's trickier to do, but those are fun.
There's someone coming up that's very much like that.
Ooh, I can't wait.
Ooh, and I can tell what you did there, but yes. I don't even know how to spoiler this.
I take it as a spoiler.
Well, no, it's really not. I don't know. I'm just gonna put it out there. And we'll put up the sign afterwards. So if you wanna turn off your thing just in case, you can. Did the Book of Brin survive the fall of Persepolis? I mean, that's weird because the Book of Brin is Legends of the First Empire thing.
I'm not.
And the fall of Persepolis is something.
Someone is clearly making lots of assumptions without having a clue as to what's going on.
And you got to be very careful how you answer this.
I'm not. It's not much of an answer.
Okay.
So as of this point in the story, no one has read beyond Age of War. Like you have, you're the only one in the world. So as of Age of War, you don't really have enough information to know even what the Book of Brin is or why it is. It's nice that you've caught on that it's significant. That's all I can tell you at this point. There's a lot coming over the next 3 books of the series. And at the end of reading those 3 books, then we can have this discussion again. Although it probably will be unnecessary at that point.
Okay. Now this, I'll put this up in case, people time go. Okay.
So the cooking souffle.
So this person's asking about book tours for your coming releases, which we've already discussed. But then they went on to say, are these worth it to get more attention on your book? As fans, we would obviously love it, but from a writer and self-publisher, are there benefits? I'm going to kind of cover this. So we have gone on tour before. When Age of Myth came out, Marais sent us to a number of book conventions and so forth, and they gave away a lot of free books, and we met a lot of people, and that was really great. In general, Mike would prefer to be home and writing than on the road. It's not that he doesn't like meeting people. Mike has his routines. He gets up. He makes his coffee.
I don't like traveling.
No.
If I had a teleporter I could step through and be at a convention, sure, that'd be great. But I mean, the idea of
getting on a plane,
going through the security and driving there and taking the plane, and Robin's got a bad back, and she would come with me, and that's why even going to Italy is going to be something of a problem, because and the only reason I'm going there is because, well, when a publisher gives you a free trip to Italy, you take it. I mean, that's just one of the things. So, but I mean, it's going to be awkward because she's got to sit in a plane seat for 8 hours straight, which is going to cause pain. And it's not fun. If it's local, I tend to do it. And we actually have people to the cabin here because I like talking to people. I like meeting people. It just the effort of having to go to the rigmarole of traveling and getting to places is kind of a pain.
And I'll answer the part about the benefits to the authors and so forth. So way back in the olden days, like in the 2008, 2009 time period.
When telephones were plugged into the wall.
That's right. We used to go to a lot of conventions, and we were in a lot of dealer halls, and we spent way too much time there. They never paid off. Like the amount of money we spent to go to them, we never made up that kind of money in the books that we sold. If it cost us $300 to go there, we might have made like $150, $200 in book sales. But some of those people did become really avid readers, and they continued to buy stuff into the future. But in general, for authors, like if you're if you have to pay for everything, if you have to pay for the hotel and the travel and stuff, it usually isn't break even for you. If the publisher is paying for everything, then yeah, you're going to get a little benefit. But the number of people you can reach in person is insignificant compared to the number of people you can reach online.
Well, usually conventions, the benefit there is not getting readers. Usually the benefit is internet or interworking with other people, networking with other writers, with agents, with publishing. That's what most people have to find there. They compare notes, they learn, work with this person, or you can get cover art done here, whatever. But that's usually what most authors get a benefit of in conventions. It's not really quite so much the panels or getting word out about their book. I mean, in the last, when we were in Delray, I think it was in Phoenix. I mean, I had a panel where I was talking about something, I don't know what it was, but I would never bring my book. You're supposed to put your book up in front. And I never did. And they'd be like, why are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm not here to sell books. I'm just here to, no, you're supposed to be selling books. I'm like going, I don't like selling books. I mean, I like helping people talking, but I don't really care for hawking books. I used to do that years ago. And I got over that. That was not so much fun. No, so I never actually bring my books anywhere. And recently we were at a writers conference in DC. And I was doing a talk there, and they asked me, do you want to sell your books here? I'm like, well, God, no. Why would I sell my books? I mean, I was there to talk to aspiring writers and help them with, I wasn't there to sell my stuff. So I'm weird that way. I don't, and people are like, well, you're supposed to be using these conferences in order to sell yourself. I know, I don't like doing that.
So this next one I'm going to take is kind of in my purview.
Okay.
They ask, how much would a person have to donate to be written into as a minor character in the next Rhaegar Chronicles? Probably a lot more than I have, but I bet if you haven't had that question yet, you will at least a few fans with enough discretionary income to fund that kind of massive perk. So for people who don't know, this is what's referred to in the industry as tuckerization, when you put someone into a book. Because we do Kickstarters, a lot of Kickstarters do tuckerizations. Those are kind of the high level perk levels. You pay like $100 and some odd and you get to be tuckerized. When we did our Kickstarters way long ago, I did not like the idea that it was only the people with the deep pockets who would get to be tuckerized. And when we did the Death of Dual Gath, I actually did do tuckerization, but it wasn't something that you paid for. Basically, what I did is I made a lottery that the people who, donated, they all had a chance of being in a drawing to get tuckerized. Well, then I found out that I was actually violating Kickstarter codes, because Kickstarter doesn't like you having lottery. So I had to take it off the Kickstarter, but I still did it. What I did is afterwards I had a survey, and everyone who had participated in the Kickstarter, didn't matter whether you did $1 or $100, you got a drawing for the tuckerization. And I think originally I was going to draw 10 people, which I did. But then as I was reading through some of the comments, some of the people's little story as to who they wanted Tuckerized and why really touched me. So I was like, oh, well, I'm going to throw this person in too. So I did a random 10 drawing, and then I think I threw in another 5, maybe it was 6, I can't recall.
What this does to me is really obnoxious
Yes.
because I create characters and I give them names, and they are this person to me because I worked with them for months and months and developed them, and then she changes their names on me. So she'll say, "You remember that character, whatever?" I'm going, "No."
So Stanley
I don't know that.
Stanley Necker became Shervin Jerami. Remember that?
Yeah.
And that Mike.
I still remember the character of Stanley Necker.
Yeah. So it screws him. And a matter of fact, I think I saw a place where you had written, and you wrote Stanley Necker. I'm like, no one knows who Stanley Necker is.
That's how I remember the character.
So bottom line, yes, we have done Tuckerization in the past. No, we don't do it based off of how much money you have, because I
do find it annoying because I do have a tendency to base my characters on the name sometimes. A good example is we were talking earlier about Scarlett Dodge. That character was created because of the name. I created the name and I went, oh, I love this name. And I got an impression of what kind of character that would be based off the name. So you couldn't have changed that name because that was significant.
I, by the way, did not like the name Scarlett Dodge.
No one did, apparently.
But I made you make a change that made her name make more sense.
Yes, you thought.
In the fact that she chose the name as opposed to it just coincidentally being her name. Okay, big spoiler coming up. If you have not finished the Rhaegar Revelations, if you have not finished the Heir of Navran,
and why wouldn't you?
turn off your audio, because this is going to be a very, very major spoiler, and we will put up the sign when we're done.
I'm excited.
This person is asking about Mercy Melbourne as a teenager, and whether you have thought of any stories with her and a little Hadrian Jr. getting underfoot and having some kinds of adventures.
No. Never. I had, long time ago, tried to imagine the combination of Mercy and Allie, because there were certain obvious attributes that the characters could have. And it would just be an interesting opening to a story if I began with some separate character of a young knight, perhaps, who happens to be out somewhere, and he happens to stumble across these two women. One happens to be Mercy, and or Mercedes, as we find out, and Allie. And I just thought that would be a nightmare
for him.
Yes, that would be crazy, because I could just imagine. A lot of ideas go through my head of what an adult version of those two characters would be like to encounter. But no, I tend to not think about the future of Rhaegar, just because, like I said, I don't want to mess with that too much. But if I were to write in a future one, it probably would be at a state in quite a bit in the future. It wouldn't be a situation where you would be meeting Royce and Hadrian again, unfortunately.
I will say that I tend to get what I want, and I have often wanted a story with Mercy and Allie. So.
Oh, you wanted a children's type thing, which is odd, because there's a lot of people who write fan fiction, I've heard.
Yes.
About like them, and you also wanted to have. Well, what would be fun is if those two got together and had an adventure.
Yeah. So
that doesn't interest me in the slightest, unfortunately.
Well, I have my ways. So, but anyways, nothing is on the table right now for that. So you can put up your sign.
Wait, I'll probably be dead before I get too far.
Yeah, put up your sign.
Oh, sorry. And
all right, and
you're done? No?
Long
question.
It's a long question. Let me read through this because I got to figure out what the spoiler aspect of it. All right, I'm going to start reading this, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Is there any way that you would see a continuation of the story after Heir of Navran? Don't get me wrong, I love the Aegis books and I love the Chronicles, and the ending of Revelations was amazing. But still, there is so much to be done. I feel like so many things were left open and would be amazing to explore. And then they list a whole bunch of things, which I'm not going to read here because they're all spoilers. My dream scenario here is that on the last book of the Aegis series, or the second to last, some evil or issue appears at the end that is left unresolved. And basically to resolve it, it would mean that you would have to go further ahead in attempts to learn more about that. Anyways, I know you always wrote the whole thing, but still though, I would like to hear more. Thanks again. Now, obviously I left a lot of stuff out of here, so I don't even know if you can make sense of that, but if you can make some sense of that and do it in a non-spoiler way.
When I wrote the series.
Do you want to put do we want a spoiler?
No.
Okay.
Because this would be a spoiler for anybody. if I said too much, it would ruin the story.
Yeah.
So there is a story arc to Rhaegar Revelations, and there's a story arc to Age, and there's a story arc to The Bridge. There is also one more story arc, and that covers everything from the beginning of the Age books, actually before that, all the way through past the end of Revelations. So there is one much bigger. Can
you give me a mouse? Because I'm going to start trying to read some of these questions here. Thank you.
Oh, someone did actually say the fact that right brain was creative. So.
Oh, okay.
You're distracting me.
Sorry.
So I was saying that there is a story arc that would actually give me something to write beyond Rhaegar, but it would be quite a ways beyond Rhaegar. It wouldn't be, what happened in the intervening years after, what happened at the end of that story. So it would have to be something beyond that. And it would be significant. But in order to write that book for readers, you'd have to read, I'd have to write it, you'd have to be able to read the Age books, because there is one thing in Revelations I specifically did not tell the readers. And that was my hook, in case I wanted to write something beyond it. And in order to give you a foundation of what that was, I have to go back to the Age books. The Age books will give you the foundation and make it all make sense. The Bridge books will expound on that and give you an understanding of what really is going on, what's at stake, and you'll discover that the entire Elan world is one story. It doesn't have to be Royce and Hadrian's story, but it's a specific story that's going on that I've never actually come out and told you. Everyone kind of gets an idea. They've all been exposed to it. They all wonder about it, but I've never really gone into depth. And that would be that last story arc, that if I finished the book and gave you the final book, you discover that the entire thing is one long story. I remember reading Isaac Asimov, and I started with I, Robot, which starts almost in present day, and how the robots are developed. And then you go to Foundation, and then Foundation's Edge, and then you come back, and his final book brings you all the way back to where they're searching for Earth, and you discover that the character who was in I, Robot is the same character at the end of the series, and it makes this complete circle. And that's what I would be doing if I got that far. If I wrote that last book, you'd see that the entire world of Elan makes complete sense from the beginning, goes all the way around, goes back to the beginning again. So it's a possibility, but probably wouldn't be, for Royce and Hadrian necessarily, which would disappoint many people.
So if I were to sum up, there could be a book post Revelations, but for it to make any sense, you would have to have all the legends read, all of Rhaegar Rev, all of Bridge read, and only then would that book.
Not only would you have to read those, but I have to write them so that I understand how to develop the final conclusion.
Right. Okay, so now we're going to go over to questions that were put in here. I know you have mentioned before your daughter is dyslexic, and that contributed to you sitting down and getting the Revelations published. How does being a parent of a dyslexic affect your writing? As a dyslexic myself, I always find actually sitting down and reading your books easier than any other author I read.
Well, I wanted to write a book that was immediately engaging, that draws you in and keeps you focused. I think that if your mind starts wandering because you're bored, because you're getting a 5-page description of a tree, is not going to be as interesting to keep up with. Also, one of the things we did was we read to her. We took turns. Like we read Harry Potter, was one of the books I tried to get her interested in, and we would literally go around and each of us would read a chapter. So that also helped. But with my books, I just try to make them easy to comprehend. In fact, when I have Tim Gerard Reynolds recite my books, or when he's recording them, I will be sitting in the studio watching him, and when he stumbles, I realize I made a mistake. So that's why I read my books aloud, as if, not just reading them aloud, but as if I was performing them. And if in the process of doing that, I find it hard, or I will get to something where I'm like, I didn't even know where I was going with this, or it just doesn't sound right, then I know I have to rewrite the sentence. Because to me, reading should be easy if the writer did a good job. If it's hard, it means that I mean, it's like if you hire someone to paint your house and I show up and give you a bunch of buckets and paintbrushes and say, here, there you go. I mean, you figure out I didn't do a very good job. You expect me to do a complete job. And to me, writing a book that is easy to understand, clear, concise, and communicates well. I mean, that's the number one thing a writer has to do is communicate. And if I'm not communicating, then I'm not writing well. That's the first thing. So I just consider that to be a good craft, to be able to make it easy to read, easy to digest, and there's a certain lyricalness to the music of the words so that it just sounds right. It should be that word. You shouldn't have to wonder what that next word is going to be. It should be, oh, of course it's going to be that word because that makes sense. Now I can surprise you with an idea, but generally the reading should be easy to go through.
And I will say, when Sarah reads the book, it's always interesting because she always has different names for people.
Sarah's my daughter, by the way.
Yeah, like who did she used to call Wyatt? Remember Wyatt always had like a different name for Wyatt?
She had all kinds of weird names, but I mean, you did too. You used to call the Galarb and the Gilbrotten.
Gilbrotten, yeah.
So
I did that just to needle you. But yeah, so Sarah's always, she always has different names for people. So she'll talk about a person and she has a different name for him, and it takes me a long time to figure out who she means. I'm like, oh, you mean Wyatt? And she's like, is that his name? I'm like, yeah. And she says, oh no, I always think of him as, someone else. As a mother of a dyslexic, I think school is just horrific for dyslexics. I don't think the structured school system has any clue how to deal with them.
I think now she listens to my books, right?
Yeah, she does a lot of listening now, and she reads a lot of fan fiction. The interesting thing about Sarah was the books being on 8.5 by 11 paper was difficult for her. And sometimes dyslexics will make like a little thing that they move over the text, where it just exposes one line at a time. But when you gave her the manuscript in like 8.5 by 11, she says, I can't read it this way.
You have to get it published.
It's got to be in a real book.
You got to get it published, Dad. I went, oh, well, sure. Why not?
How did you get Tim for the narrator? Is that strictly an Audible decision, or did you have input? Do you communicate with him very often?
Well, initially it had nothing to do with us whatsoever. Recorded Books came to Orbit. They wanted the rights, and Recorded Books paired up Tim with my writing.
Andy Paris.
Excuse me?
Andy Paris is the guy at Recorded Books who meshed you up with. Now that being so yes. So in the beginning we had no say.
I didn't meet Tim until we were in New York for the Audies when he was up for what book was it?
Theft of Swords.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
No, I thought it was one of the Chronicles. Okay. Yeah. So that's when I met him. I met him at the dinner just before the awards, and it was interesting because I think Recorded Books says, you haven't met? And we're like, no, we haven't met. And so we ended up talking through dinner, and they were calling us for the awards, and we didn't want to leave because we were having a fun time. But yeah, since then we made a point of coming to New York, and we take him out to dinner, and then we sit in the studio, and we usually sit in for the whole book read. And if we can't get to New York, then we hook up audially, and we can listen to him and talk to him here as they're in the studio.
Yeah. So early on we had no say. So I consider we must have had some really good karma because
we lucked out.
Because the sun shone on us that day when Andy Paris paired us up with Tim. But since then, all the books post Rose and Thorn, we had complete control over narrator, and getting Tim was always a part of that. And we even talked to him on email. His wife has written a science fiction novel that we're trying to help him out with.
It's not really normal for writers to have interaction with the narrators. Like I've talked to several writers in New York, and they were saying that they go, you go to the studio recording. I said, yeah. And there are people who live in New York and said, why don't I do that? I don't know. Why don't you do that? But I guess they didn't even know they could. So.
How much of Age of Myth lore did you have planned out while writing Revelations? The naming, the catapult, Persephone really stood out to me. I DM a lot of D&D games, and I tend to write a lot of lore that never gets into the games. Kind of hurts my heart sometimes. Haha.
Yeah, it's funny. There was for my 10th anniversary post, I was going to post a conversation of emails that I had with a friend, high school friend, when I was conceiving of Revelations, and in it, it had a bunch of things in there of how I actually came up with a lot of the ideas in real time. And she wouldn't let me post it because it had a lot of spoilers.
Oh
So,
my, did it have a lot of spoilers?
but I can tell you that, yeah, a lot of it was there. I actually did come up with quite a bit of different, and in it, I was saying that the books that I really like Harry Potter or Tolkien, you can always tell that the author knows a lot more about the world than they're telling you. You get that sense that there's a much bigger picture, and you get a very small portion of it. And what that gives you is it gives you sort of an impression of reality. Because if I'm telling you about something in real life, you assume there's a lot of other stuff that I'm not telling you. So you have to have a much larger picture, and you have to be telling me a small scaled down version of it for it to seem real. So that's one of the things I set out to do. So yeah, I actually had about 8,000 years of history. It has expanded now to at least 10,000 years. But yeah, I had quite a bit of it in place, not to the detail that I do now, because I had vague ideas and some specific instances, and I had to really nail them down to actual scenes. So it's fun for me to actually see how it comes out in a concrete form.
And that's typically thought of as the iceberg approach, where you got a lot more under the water that doesn't make it onto the page. And when I was talking about writers who sometimes do the rookie mistakes, I find they're exposing too much of their iceberg, especially initially, right? Like you get these writers and you're like learning all this stuff like in the first 5 pages, and you're like, whoa, dude,
Well,
like
it's
spread
always,
that out.
but it's always a situation where, like, when I was writing Emerald Storm, I had researched nautical information, and a lot of it was really cool. And I started my first effort at it. I started thinking, wow, I'm putting way too much in here. People are not reading this book to learn about sea voyages. So I had to back a lot of that out. And the same thing is true with world building. If you create a lot of it, it's great. It gives you, by creating an enormous amount of it, you get a foundation, and you see how it builds up to the point of the part that you're actually going to use. You need the foundation to make it credible and make it all connect to each other. But you don't explain it. Like if I had a gun in a story, I'm not going to explain to you how the bullet is full of gunpowder, and I would just tell you the gun shoots. But I have to know how that works when I'm explaining how the person's using it. It makes sense. But I'm not going to explain to you metallurgy. So that's the concept. You have to you have to know a large part, but you don't have to explain a lot of it.
Just out of curiosity, what are your thoughts, feelings on the Wheel of Time series?
Unfortunately, I'm embarrassed to say I have not read the Wheel of Time series, so I can't really say too much about it.
Yeah, the amount of,
I told you I have holes in my literary, particularly from like the late 70s on through the 90s. I really didn't read much fantasy. I read Eddings, I read Feist, but not much more than that. I never actually read Wheel of Time.
yeah, most fantasy authors are far more well read than Michael, and it's funny because
I'm
because
well read,
people,
but not in fantasy.
well, because people will say, "Oh, you stole this from this or that or the other thing." I was like, "Oh boy, he hasn't read any of those."
No, see, I started off writing in fantasy, and when I was 13. And then she actually introduced me to Stephen King, who was writing some interesting book called The Stand at the time. And then from there, I branched out and I got into science fiction. I got into literary fiction. I started reading classics because I was teaching myself to write. And I wanted to expose myself to a very large variety of writing, because if you only read fantasy, you're not going to be able to do much with that, because anything you learn there you can't use because you'd be stealing it. You'd be doing plagiarism. So it's so much better to be reading something completely in a different genre, of a different type of style and genre, and be able to pull information from there, ideas, and combine it in a fantasy form. You have a whole new novel. So by focusing on fantasy, it would have really done a disservice to my ability to write.
Yeah, there's this famous story about Fahard and the Grey Mouser, we were reading a review in, I forget, it was one of the really earlier books, and Mike had named this inn the Gray Mouse Inn. And in the review, they said, "Oh, wasn't that clever that you gave this little homage to, Fritz
Right.
Lieber, because you're obviously such a big fan of his books." And we're like, "What did Fritz Lieber write?" And we had to go, like, we Googled online.
I remember in the 70s, I remember the Gray Mouse, and I remember seeing the cover, and I thought, that might be interesting. I might want to buy it. And I actually did. I never did buy it, so I never actually read it.
So a lot of people read Michael's book and say, "Oh, you were influenced by Fahad the Grey Miser," and he's never read that. In fact, we were in New York, and a fan gave you.
A fan gave me one of his books, and I have it, but I still haven't read it.
Because Mike always says he can't read that till he's sure he won't write any more Royce and Hadrian, because
I don't want it to influence.
It might influence.
But yeah, I don't read a lot in the fantasy realm.
You do more to connect with your readers in the real world than most authors. I assume that takes a lot of energy on your part. Do you get something out of it besides book sales?
Okay, so I don't know. I don't think I'm unusual in this, but I might be. A short story. So I used to work at a software company, where I did advertising, and they gave me a raise, which was a ridiculous raise. It was like 50% raise, and I quit like a month later. And the reason is that I'm not motivated by money, but I am motivated by people appreciating what I do. And they didn't appreciate what I do, but they just threw money at me. So when you write in a vacuum, as most writers do. You don't get to hear applause when you did a good job. So my real reward is what people say. If I write something that I think is really great, and it's kind of subtle, and I don't even know if people are going to get it, and someone writes back to me and says, "Oh, I love this part," and I'm like, "Wow, you understood what I was trying to say. That really subtle line resonated with you. That is a rush. That is what I love. That's my payment." So interacting with readers is great. I love doing that. I love hearing what people think of what I wrote, because that's why I wrote it. It wasn't so much for the money. I mean, she was actually making most of the money. I didn't have to do it. So, I mean, now I did, because she's gotten older now, and
I don't work.
She doesn't work. But I mean, before I did it just for the joy of writing. So to have people come back and say, "I love this because of the thing that you thought was great," that's really wonderful. So that's why I particularly like readers.
Yeah, it's interesting, you're always getting an email that says, something like, "I'm sorry to bother you," or, it's like, wait a minute, you're writing me to tell me something I wrote you really love, and you think that's a bother? I mean, that's like the best thing that I could get.
I always wonder, it's like, people must think that because I'm a successful author, I'm something other than human, because it's just bizarre. It's like, so do you often have people come up and say what a wonderful person you are, and you get mad? I mean, weird, but no, I don't do that. I think it's great when you do something that you love doing, and people come up to you and say how great you are at it, and we love what you did. Yeah, that's great. I mean, what's better than that?
Here, let me just.
Oh yeah.
I'll just squeeze
it back in.
Squeeze the little head back in there, so you don't get too heavy there. I had highlighted what the next question was, and now I lost it. Where is it? I had this, and now what did I do with it? Sorry. Oh yeah. What is your favorite quote from your own books? My personal favorite is the unicorn exchange.
Well, that's a pretty long quote. That's like a page.
It was fun though. The unicorns.
There's a lot of the one that always sticks in my head, because I always thought it was interesting, was the one that someone actually called out, and I was surprised. Because in the old days on Amazon, if you highlighted a book on a Kindle, it would add up the number of people who highlighted the same passage, and would rank them. And the one I liked was, what was it? Sharks don't eat fish because they like it, but because chickens don't swim. I just thought that was a fun quote. It's not necessarily one of my best, but that's one of the ones that I got done. When I finished writing, I went, that could be a quote. But
I always like any plan where I don't die a horrible death.
Yeah.
That was a fun one. By the way, and we have this beautiful quote of Michael's hanging above our fireplace. I can't move the camera down there. So someone took this ancient piece of wood. What kind of wood was it? It's
It's
kind
an
of
oak.
an oak.
Yeah.
And it's
a 300-year-old oak.
And they made this plaque, and they carved one of Michael's quotes into it, and then they I don't know if they burned or
it was a Myron quote.
Yes, it was a Myron quote. And it's beautiful, and it hangs over our fireplace, and so it's interesting to find what people find as nice quotes, and that's there are a few things that, like, if the cabin was burning down, I would grab on the way out. But that would be one of them. And this thing behind us, which can you turn the?
Yeah, I'm gonna turn it up.
This is Michael's seal, and some nice reader silk screened that for us on sailcloth and framed it for us and sent it our way. And that's kind of another treasured thing. So we get these cool things, and those are the things I would grab. That and the one thing I don't know where it is, because I think it's in the Fairfax house, but Mark Simonetti's cover.
Oh yeah.
That book, we have that somewhere. We've got to get that out here. Yeah. So I don't want it being away from me. But that's another one. It was called Coverama. It's a book that Mark Simonetti did a crowdfunding for, and it's a beautiful book. It's got some of Mike's artwork in it. It's got a lot of
not my artwork, but Mark's artwork of my book.
Yeah, and it was really, really cool. What else do we got here? Let's just say you had some competent software developers on this call that would love creative input. Let's see here. I have to turn my audio off for half these questions.
We're sorry.
All right.
One of these days I should have like a big party for spoilers for everyone who's read everything of my stuff. Then we can get together and actually talk about all the cool stuff.
So I may be wrong here, and if I am, someone type quickly. I think we've answered everything in here.
The long chocolate cherry cake.
Well, that's not a cake question, I would assume. But let me just. You scroll, Mike, and see if I missed anything. Your eyes are, or you don't have your glasses on. Your eyes aren't any better than mine.
Well, it's illuminated. So when it's dark, I got a problem. They keep reporting on how far they're through the book. How much of age lore did you have planned out? Yeah, we did that one. Why is that one up to a presenter? Why is that one in blue? Sorry, we don't want to just sit here and read. Well, we have to do something entertaining.
Okay, keep going down.
Not a question, but looking forward to meeting you in person next fall.
Oh, cool. All right, so I think that pretty much concludes today's. We will have another one of these next Wednesday. It's termed to be the writer question and answer. And if you put out some questions in the survey that were not answered today, it was probably because I thought that they were more for the writer session, and so I moved it to there. If you think of some questions between now and next Wednesday, you can put them in the survey, and I will add them. And I hope I got everything. Hold on. Your mouse bugs me immensely. Am I going the right way?
Mm-hmm. It's your software. I don't understand software.
Wednesday or this coming Sunday. Did I say Sunday? Because it should have been. They were both on Wednesday. One was on the 3rd. The other one was on the 10th, I believe.
Why would you plan things for Wednesdays?
I don't know. It just was a nice middle of the week when I thought people would be available. Oh, I thought it was on the 7th. I don't know. Now you got me questioning. Whatever I posted in the Indiegogo, that's when it is. Now that you mention it, the 3rd and the 7th does sound right. Although I thought it was the 3rd and the 10th. But regardless, we'll look in the, whatever I posted in the updates, the Indiegogo, that's when it will be there. Do you have an example of a subtle piece of writing that you were grateful readers caught on to? Oh, you mentioned liking readers appreciate the same parts you enjoy writing. Do you have an example of a subtle piece of writing?
I do, but right now I'm drawing a blank. Now you brought it up.
Yeah, John had a couple.
Yeah, John thought of a couple. It's just the usual. If you were to bring it up, I go, wow, you caught that, and nothing's necessarily coming to mind.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Oh well, there's one good one, which I thought was fairly subtle. Apparently, you know, some people don't. But there's a reference when Hadrian makes a reference to rain in Emerald Storm, which I thought was a fairly subtle drop, and a lot of people put that together more than I would have expected. You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. I caught it immediately, but I kind of.
I mean, there
catch those.
There are things that you put in that, I mean, there are people who have gotten the end of Revelations, and they go, huh? I didn't get the end.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And I'm like, really? Wow. Okay. I'm surprised you didn't get that.
Okay. We're gonna do a spoiler thing here.
No, we're not gonna do a spoiler thing. I'm just saying that.
No, there's something I want to say.
Oh.
Okay.
Right.
So this is so for people who have not finished through all of Revelations, if you have not finished Heir of Navron, turn off your audio. Kyle and the White Feather. Okay. This was a reference that showed up first in, I believe it was Album Partha, was it not?
Yes.
And I read the whole story, all 6 books, and I got the end. And at the end of the book, the feather falls from the sky. And
you didn't get it.
Well, and Mike says, well, what do you think about that feather? And I was like, yeah, I totally don't understand what the hell you're talking about. Like, what is the thing with this feather? Don't you remember back in Album Partha when blah, 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 blah? And I went, you're expecting me to remember something from book 2 in book 6? He's like, yeah. And so then I made Mike add all these little feather references throughout the book. And when the books were 6 individual novels, it was fine because they were coming out every 6 months. And sometimes it was as simple as a picture with, Kyle getting a feather, or maybe it was a little story that Amelia was telling about a feather.
Kept trying to figure out new ways to put that in the book.
Yeah. But then when Orbit came along and they combined 2 books per novel, then I started thinking, oh my God, there's now too many feather references.
And they were all released month by month, so they're all together, yeah. So
and I thought.
We thought it was way overkill.
And I thought, well, we should tear some of them out. But then I thought that people who had read, they would notice they got taken out and they would put too much emphasis on it.
But nevertheless, it's just amazing that people would have had that many references to the damn feather. At the end, still not put 2 and 2 together. There was one. Someone,
okay, so I'm gonna.
Wait, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna get rid of this.
What was the one? There. Someone recently wrote to me. They asked me a question. Oh, I don't know if this is a spoiler or not. I don't think so. If you've read it, you'll understand it. If you haven't, you won't figure it out. The phrase from the age book, even now. A person read that, but instead of reading it, even now, what they read was even now.
Oh.
And they thought, so what was uneven before? What were they justifying? I'm like, oh,
yeah,
no,
they thought something was.
And they couldn't figure out.
Yeah.
So that was just a weird kind of, okay, I can see that if you put the emphasis in the wrong word, but go back and read the end of chapter 12.
Yeah.
It'll make more sense. So it's little things like that people miss. And I do it all the time when I'm reading. I'll be reading, and I'll if you skip one sentence, you may be completely thrown off because something important was in that sentence. And so I always try to make an effort to try and reintroduce it enough times, and she'll go behind me and she's like, oh, this is just, you're just, repeating yourself. I'm like, well, yeah, because I want to make sure they got it. So I have to rephrase it differently so she doesn't edit it out thinking I was just, losing my mind. But sometimes things I would need to repeat.
Well, it's a tightrope walk. You want to give enough clues that people can figure stuff out, right, but not too many clues that it's completely obvious. And what happens is some people catch everything and some people.
I mean, ideally you want it to be that the person figures out what you want them to understand, like a few sentences before you tell them. That's ideal. But you can't do that because everyone's different. So some people, they're going to say, oh, I saw it coming miles away. And other people are going to say, I don't even get it. What are you talking about? So it's hard to do to get the largest swath of people.
And it looks like we have a confirmation from Terry. Thank you, Terry, for looking this up.
Thank you, Terry.
And DT Nelson. So it is on the 7th. So that is, I guess, Sunday.
Okay, that's good.
So that's when we'll be having the next thing. And I appreciate everyone coming. I hope this GoToMeeting worked well for people. I hope it was.
I wish they could talk. This is.
Well, I have them all on mute because if everyone started talking,
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, I
Oh.
muted it, everyone right at the
Oh.
get-go because
It's kind of obnoxious. I never get to hear anyone talk.
you want me to unmute people. I can unmute people.
I don't know. I wonder what would happen. Now I'm scared. It's like unleashing, the hounds of hell here.
I don't know. Let's see what happens. Let's see here.
I'm gonna unmute them.
Yeah.
I'm gonna release you. This is fun.
Okay, everyone can talk.
You can talk.
Hi.
Hello there.
Hey.
Hey. This is interesting.
Yeah.
How many people are here?
There are 14 people here right
14.
now. Yeah.
Wow, that's more than I would expect to be one spot. So I hope this is all good for everyone.
Yeah, no, this has been great.
It was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Enjoyable.
All righty. Well, we will see you guys on Sunday, and thank you for coming, and thank you for supporting the Indiegogo. It was a huge success, and we're really excited. Mike did another 802 signing of books on.
I was out signing them today.
Wow.
Those are different ones. Those aren't Age of Swords. Those
That's true.
are Death of Dual Gas.
All I ever do is sign books anymore. I don't have a job.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys, and we'll see you on Sunday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
This conference will